My name's Grant Menke, and I'm a 5th grade teacher at Think Academy. And tonight, I know we did have a webinar last week covering the AMC 8 exam, but tonight we're really going to be focusing in on the 2019 exam specifically and really looking at it, that specific exam in detail. And so yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So first I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I graduated from UCLA. I really love the outdoors, I love animals, and I love to go into the beach, but I've really developed a strong passion for teaching. And I love teaching, specifically science and math classes. I've really fostered this love for teaching, and it's blossomed, to be honest. That's a little bit about me. Now, as far as what we're going to be doing tonight, we're going to be, first we're just going to kind of introduce quickly the AMC 8, and then we're going to be covering specifically the questions from last year's exam. We're going to be looking at the statistics from the test, the contents of the questions, and then we're going to get a chance to look in depth into a couple of the questions and go through those solutions. So you can get a really good, solid exam, or solid idea about what to expect from this year's exam, which is coming up in just 52 days. Awesome. So first, let's get started here with what is the AMC 8? For any of you who don't know. Now, the AMC 8 is a 40-minute, 25-question math competition for students in grades 8 and below, hence the name AMC 8. And it's hosted annually by the Mathematical Association of America. So this exam, it really tests students on their problem-solving skills, first and foremost, their proportional reasoning, elementary geometry, spatial visualizations, and data interpretation. So all topics that are covered in an average middle school math curriculum. Awesome. So if you haven't had a chance to sign up for the AMC 8 yet, you still have time. You can register, for registration information, you can scan this QR code right here, and that's a way we give out registration information for that exam, which again, it's coming up in just 52 days. So you definitely want to check that out. Okay, so now getting into the specifics of the 2019 exam, we had a total of almost 100,000 students, 96,500 students take the exam in 2019, and each year it's been going up. So we expect one of these years it'll probably pass that 100,000 student threshold, and that's worldwide students. So both in the U.S. and globally, we had almost 100,000 students take it last year. Now up here in the top right, I have the score distribution for the 2019 AMC 8 specifically, and you can see it's definitely right-tailed. So we have a big focus around right between 5 and 10 was the average score, and that makes sense. The average was about 8.4 last year. And now a reason for this is that the first 15 questions of the exam are generally easier than the last 10. So that explains why you see this average to be relatively low and right around 5 to 10. Now, as far as what you can achieve and your children can achieve when taking the exam, the first one would be the achievement roll. Now, this is only for students grade 6 and below, and it's if they score a 15 or higher. And this is still extremely prestigious, considering that only about 2,000 students out of the 100,000 students that take the exam each year score and receive this achievement roll. So it's very impressive for a student in grade 6 who might not have seen as much algebra and geometry as the 7th and 8th graders taking the exam to be able to score 15 out of 25 or greater. So very impressive there. Then moving on, for all grade levels, you can hit honor roll with a score of 19 to 22 out of the 25 questions. Again, this is extremely prestigious and impressive, considering only 3.3% of the students that took the exam in 2019 hit this benchmark. So it's very impressive still just to hit that honor roll. That means you're getting all of the first 15 and then about half of the harder last half. So it's last half of the exam. Very impressive still. And then we have the distinguished honor roll, which is for students scoring between 23 and 25. This is incredible. That means the students are only missing up to 2 questions on the exam out of the 25 in that extremely low time threshold that they're given. And this is shown in the stats right here Last year we only had 818 students globally hit that threshold of Distinguished Honor Roll. So extremely prestigious and really awesome for those kids. Yeah, that's great. And then we have, lastly, of course, perfect score, which, as is in the name, 25 out of 25. And what's crazy is that globally only 151 students, or 0.16% of the total 100,000 students that took the exam, were able to achieve that perfect score. So by no means is this an easy exam, and it definitely is important to prepare for it as best you can. Awesome. So moving right along, we're going to look at, for 2019 specifically, how the questions kind of broke down. Now, the average correct rate for the exam as a whole was about 37% last year. And comparing that to previous years, that's about what you see year to year. It's not particularly difficult or particularly easy of a year compared to other AMC8s. So the question makers did a great job there. And now you can see in this graphic right here exactly the concept I was explaining earlier, where the exam starts out with about, 80% correct rate on the first couple questions, and then that seems to hold above the threshold of the average for the first 15 questions. Then once you hit questions 16 through 25, it really drops off and is hitting significantly below the average of about 37%. It's hitting closer to 20 to 15% correct rate for some of these questions. So based on that, a great strategy to approach it with, we have outlined up here in the top, is that for those first 15 questions, you don't want to get trapped. You don't want to be like, okay, I have this many minutes for every question on the test, because you'll get trapped and you won't save enough time for those last 10 questions. So you want to be spending about 1 minute to 1.5 minutes, no more, for those first 15 questions. You want to be getting through them efficiently and accurately, and so that you can save 2 to 3 minutes to spend on each of the last 10 questions, which will definitely require that amount of time. Another common strategy is, let's say you're just going for a good chance at honor roll or achievement roll if you're in 6th grade or below, and all you would need is getting the first 15 for sure correct would give you a really good chance at honor roll and would guarantee you achievement roll if you're in 6th grade or below. And so it can be, some students approach it with this strategy where they spend most of their time on the first 15 just to guarantee they get those points, and then kind of just make educated, quick guesses on the last 10. And don't spend a lot of time there. Definitely a valid strategy if that's your goal. It's a great way to achieve it. Awesome. So next we're going to talk about the exam contents. Now this is specifically for 2019 again, I want to remind you. But you can see the breakdown in the pie chart right here. Year to year, the exam mainly focuses on algebra, geometry, and then statistics and counting. And that was true again this year. You can see that with 9 algebra questions, 6 geometry questions, and 7 statistics and counting questions. So year to year, you usually see that. So if you're going to focus on 3 specific modules, those are the 3 I would definitely recommend. You have to know those well to be able to do well on this exam. But often the exam also covers a small amount of number theory and functions. However, I do want to point out 2 abnormalities that I've highlighted right here. On the right side is that this year in 2019, geometry had 6 questions. Typically, geometry will be more closer to 4 to 5. So this, you don't want to go into it expecting 6 geometry questions this year, because more than likely, based on previous years, you won't see that full 6. Now for the other abnormality in 2019 was number theory with only 2 questions. That's relatively low compared to previous years. Usually you can go into it expecting 3 to 4 number theory questions. So definitely want to keep those in mind. But again, 2020 could be different, so this is not an end-all be-all, but it gives you a good idea of what you can expect from the exam this year. Awesome. Okay, so before we get into each question, I just wanted to ask if you would take a second to subscribe to Think Academy. We have other videos, including our webinar from last week, that you can rewatch if you want more information about the AMC8, called All You Need to Know for the AMC8, and it more gets into the details about the structure of the exam. And yeah, so some great information there. And we have other ISEE and other prep webinars on there for you as well. So definitely check that out. Awesome. So the first question we're going to cover is question number 6 from the 2019 exam. I have it highlighted. It was a little bit tough, a little bit easier than the average question on the exam last year. And it was a statistics and counting problem, and the recommended time for this one's about 45 seconds. So let's go ahead and read it together. So it says there are 81 grid points uniformly spaced in the square shown in the diagram below, including the points on the edges. Point P is in the center of the square. Given that point Q is randomly chosen among the other 80 points, what is the probability that the line PQ is a line of symmetry for the square? So quickly, the first thing you have to realize is what a line of symmetry is, and that just means if we fold the shape in half along that line, both halves would be identical or would reflect one another. Awesome. So so I'd look at the square, and the first most obvious way you could fold it in a line of symmetry would be anything along just cutting it in half, right? So you have these 4 points right here, as well as any of these 4 points right here would create a line of symmetry, cuts the square in half. And then moving clockwise, you can also cut it diagonally, right? So any of these 4 points and these 4 points. And then just continuing along this pattern, we can see these 4 points would also work, cutting it in half. And lastly, diagonally the opposite way. Awesome. So now, another important formula you need to know for this problem is the definition of probability, which I have highlighted for you right here. So it's our number of desired outcomes divided by our number of total outcomes. Now in this problem, our desired outcomes would be points Q that create a line of symmetry of PQ. And we found all of those points already, and so we can just total those up. It looks like we have 8 different lines with 4 points on each line. So we can just do 4 times 8, and then we're dividing it by our total number of outcomes, which are the 80 points that aren't P, right? So dividing that by 80, and then we can reduce this down and get 2/5 here. Awesome. And that would be option number C. So that gives you an idea of a relatively easier question seen on the AMC 8. Awesome, so moving right along, next we have question number 9. So again, we're still within the first 15 questions. So you can see the average correct rate was, for this question, was just about the average for the entire exam. So it gives you a really good idea of an average question on the exam. And this is our first geometry problem on the exam. Again, another really important module. And the recommended time for this one, again, it's still within the first 15, so we recommend spending about 1 minute on a question such as this. Now, this question is asking, Alex and Felicia each have cats as pets. Alex buys cat food in cylindrical cans that are 6 centimeters in diameter and 12 centimeters high. And then Felicia buys cat food in cylindrical cans that are 12 centimeters in diameter and 6 centimeters high. What is the ratio of the volume of one of Alex's cans to the volume of one of Felicia's cans? Awesome, so the first thing we need to know here is the volume of a cylindrical can. And I have that formula for you here. You definitely want to know this formula among others for common shapes, for areas and volumes of common shapes for the exam. You definitely want to know those. And then here's our cylinder right here for reference. And so the first thing we do is just break this up into Alex's cans and then Felicia's cans, right? Okay, so a pro tip right here, we see that our formula for volume uses pi. However, we notice in the problem that it never estimated what pi is. And so a common tip you can use is if the question doesn't estimate what pi is, but your formula uses pi, it typically means you'll be able to cancel out pi later on in the question. So for now, just leave it as pi, and then wait till later on in the question, and typically it will be able to cancel out. So definitely keep that in mind. So we have the volume of Alex's cans are just going to be equal to pi times the radius of his can squared times h, which gives us pi times 108. And then we have Felicia's cans, which would be equal to pi times 216. Awesome. And we can see that here. We go back to the problem, what are we being asked for? What is the ratio of the volume of one of Alex's cans to the volume of one of Felicia's cans? And so we can see that since we're just comparing ratio, we're able to cancel out pi right here. And we can clearly see that, 108 times 2 gives us 216, making this very simple in that we know that the ratio would be one of Alex's cans to Felicia's cans are twice as large as Alex's cans. So we have a 1-to-2 ratio here, giving us option B right there. Awesome. So yeah, remember that pro tip right there. If it doesn't estimate pi typically, and your formula requires it, you'll be able to cancel it out later on. All right, moving right along, we have question 16 from the 2019 exam. Now this is the first one in that final 10 kind of threshold we defined earlier, where the average correct rate drops significantly below the average for the whole exam. So this one comes in at about 20% correct rate. So definitely a more difficult question on the exam. And again, this is an algebra problem, which is, as I mentioned earlier, the most common type of problem on the exam from year to year. And our recommended time is 1.5 minutes for this question. Okay, and the formula we'll talk about the problem first. We have Chiang drives 15 miles at an average speed of 30 miles per hour. How many additional miles will we have to drive at 55 miles per hour to average 50 miles per hour for the entire trip? Awesome. So whenever you have a problem like this that covers speed, time, distance, you want to use this distance formula I have right here. So this will definitely come out on, or it could come up on questions in the 2020 exam. So keep that in mind. So let's just start with this formula right here. We have our total distance traveled for the whole trip. And that would equal to the distance of it. Looks like we can kind of break this into two segments, right? We have our first segment traveling slower, and then our second segment traveling faster. So we have our distance of segment 1 plus our distance of segment 2 would equal our total distance, right? And quickly, we're going to set x for this problem equal to the additional time driven, because that is a big unknown that we don't know, since we know all the speeds for each of these, right? But we don't know the time for all of them. So the additional time driven will be x. Okay, awesome. So the total distance we drive, well, we can just use this formula right here, would be the total speed, and that's given right here, 50 miles per hour for the whole trip. Awesome. So we know we want to go 50 miles per hour, but how long are we spending on this trip? Well, for the first segment, we're going 15 miles at an average speed of 30 miles per hour. So that's right, that'd be about half an hour. And now how long is the second part of the trip? X, because remember, we just defined it as x. And now this would be equal to the distance for segment 1, which for segment 1 is given right here. We drove 15 miles, added to the distance for segment 2, which we don't know, but we do know our speed during segment 2, which is 55 miles per hour, and that is times by our additional time driven x. Awesome. Now if we just multiply and simplify this problem down, we can solve x is equal to 2 hours right here. Awesome. And now what are we asking for in the question? We're asking for how many additional miles, not how much longer. So we just quickly know we're going 2 hours, and we're traveling at 55 miles per 1 hour. Awesome. So cross cancel that, and we end up with 110 miles. Awesome. And that is option D right here. Now, let's say that you were stuck, or maybe you're in 5th or 6th grade and you haven't learned this kind of algebra before, where you have to write your own formula. Okay, that's alright. I say if you're ever stuck on this exam or you're running out of time, a good thing you can do, or another pro tip you can do, is look at the answer choices and see if, using some insights from the problem, just reading the problem, you can maybe solve backwards or find one that might be the best choice. And in this case, we know we're being asked for how many additional miles we would be driving at 55 miles per hour. Well, maybe just based off that, you can look at the answer choices and see if any of them are easily divisible by 55. And in this case, only one of them is, 110. So that just making that kind of educated guess on this problem would actually give you the correct answer. And it's a way to quickly give you a better chance at solving the problem. But of course, if you know algebra and you have the time, we always recommend guaranteeing you get the right answer by solving it thoroughly, as we did. Awesome. So moving right along, we now have question 20 from the 2019 exam. And again, this one is significantly below the average because it's in that last 10. And again, it's an algebra question, which again is the most popular year to year. And the recommended time we recommend to spend on this question is just 2 minutes. Okay, so the question asks how many different real numbers, x, satisfy this equation. Just a quick tip here, real numbers would be any number on a number line, negative and positive numbers. So if we start simplifying this down, we see we get to x squared minus 5 is equal to the square root of 16. But remember, this is the key point here. When you're solving like this, you have to do plus minus the square root, because either negative 4 times negative 4 or positive 4 times positive 4 would give you 16. So either would work in this part of the equation. That is the key here. You have to know that to be able to solve this question accurately. And so then we can break this up into two problems. X squared minus 5 is equal to negative 4, or x squared minus 5 is equal to positive 4. Awesome. And just continuing to work through this, we get x is equal to rad, remember, plus minus rad 1 here, and x is equal to plus minus rad 9 on this side, if you work that down. Again, that's the key, to recognize that it's plus minus. And if we solve this out, we get x is equal to positive or negative 1 here, and x could be equal to positive or negative 3 here. So total, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 real numbers that satisfy the equation. If you're not sure on that and you want to check that, you can always, at the end of the problem, if you have time, plug negative 1 back in, negative 3 back in, and make sure it does satisfy the equation. But we know that one is going to be 4 there. Awesome, awesome. So moving along, we have our last question we're going to cover today, question number 22, and this was, based on correct rate, this was the hardest question from the 2019 exam, AMCA. So definitely give you an idea of the upper and lower bounds for this exam. And this again is an algebra problem, and the recommended time, we recommend saving 2.5 minutes for this question. Remember, our first question that we did today was just 45 seconds. So don't treat all questions the same. You don't want to get trapped early on in the exam. You want to be saving time for these harder questions later in the test. Awesome. So let's read it together. We have a store increased the original price of a shirt by a certain percent and then lowered the new price by the same amount. Given that the resulting price was 84% of the original price, by what percent was the price increased and then decreased? Awesome. So we can set x to be equal to the fraction of discount. That's how much we're increasing it by percentage-wise or fraction-wise, and then decreasing it by. Okay. And so based off this, if we reread the question, that would mean that first we're increasing the price, right? So we would have 1 plus x first, and then that would be the new price of the shirt, and then we're lowering that price of the shirt by 1 minus x. Multiplying it by that to give us the final price of the shirt, which would be equal to 84% of that whole or original 1, so 0.84 would be our final price, right? Awesome, awesome. So now if we simplify this down, we get x squared equals 0.16, and thus x would be equal to 0.4 here. And now the question, remember, x is the fraction of discount, but we're asked here for the percent of discount. So we have to translate this into percent, and that would be equal to 40%, or option number E right here. Now again, if you haven't learned algebra, a longer way to solve this, but that would still allow you to solve it, is just take each of the answer choices and try them out as a percent, and set the price to say something like $100, something easy to work with, and just say you raise it by 16%, then you lower it by 16%, what price do you end up with? And work through each one here. It will take you longer, require more calculations, but if you have the time, you would be able to solve this one without algebra. But that's always a good option to look at your answer choices and try to work from there if you're stuck. Okay, awesome. So just a quick summary of what we did today. We covered the exam contents, which remember was primarily geometry, algebra, and then statistics and counting. We talked about the level of difficulty of the exam, which is generally higher for that first 15 questions, and then significantly, or the level of difficulty is lower for the first 15 questions, and then is significantly higher for the last 10 questions. So the last 10 questions get pretty hard, for sure. Some formulas we use today would be the volume of a cylinder, our formula for probability, and the distance traveled. You'd want to know a lot of different geometric shapes, areas, and volume formulas, and then these two, probability and distance formula, are very useful. Some tips I talked about today for taking the exam. The first one was that if the formula uses pi, but the question didn't offer an estimation, always keep in the back of your head that that typically means you can cancel out pi later on. So just to make it easy, leave it as pi for then. Don't try to put 3.14 there and mess with it. That's definitely a tip that'll help you be quicker and more accurate. If you're stuck, always try using the answer choices and looking at the problem backwards. That's a great tip if you're ever stuck or you're trying to look for a way to solve the problem without algebra because you might not know that complicated algebra yet. And then lastly, don't get trapped. Do not get trapped by the low level of difficulty of those first 15 problems. Don't say, hey, I have almost 2 minutes per problem. I'll spend 2 minutes on each of these first 15. You'll be almost out of the time by the time you hit the harder questions, and you won't have enough time left. So work through those first ones quickly, knowing those hard problems are coming later in the test. Awesome. So again, yeah, AMC 8 registration is available through Think Academy. The exam's on November 10th, so you just scan this QR code right here to get some information for how to register. And we also have, to help you prepare, we offer 2 different classes here at Think Academy. The first being called Let's Tackle AMC 8, and the second being called AMC 8 Prep. And I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about what each of the ones of those entails. The first one, Let's Tackle AMC 8. So that's a 1 hour and 15-minute class once a week, and it's offered for 7 weeks at a time, in a row at a time. And those 7 weeks, as you can see in this chart right here, each week of the round covers a different test, specific like we did today, specific that year's test, that year's AMC 8, dating back to the last 35 years. And so if you took this Let's Tackle AMC 8 for 5 rounds or sessions in a row, which would be 35 weeks total, you'd see every one of the last 35 AMC 8 exams in depth. So it's a really interesting way to look at it, looking at it year to year from class to class. But yeah, so we do have a class running for this it starts on September 25th through November 8th, so it would be a perfect right lineup with, you'd finish it right in time for the 2020 AMC 8. And this one's offered on Fridays and Sundays. And then we also have the AMC 8 Prep, which is more of a short-term, it's only a 6-week kind of crash course, 2 hours per class. And this one starts on the 26th and then again ends on just the beginning of November. So it'd be perfectly in time for the 2020 AMC 8. And we designed this class a little bit differently. Instead of doing it year by year, each class would be, it would cover a different module. So like we'd cover numbers and operations first, geometry in another week. So each week you're covering a different topic of questions rather than a different specific year's AMC 8. And then for this class, currently all of our spots are full. However, we're opening up new spots right now. However, we want to know what times work best for any of you who are interested in registering in this class. So if you scan this QR code right here, it'll take you to a page where you can just submit a quick Google form and tell us what time slots work best for you. So then we'll open up new spots soon for this one, and you'll be able to enroll in that time that works for you. Awesome, awesome. And so lastly today, the last thing I wanted to say is if you have any questions or follow-up information that you want, you can add us on WeChat and Telegram. On the left is my WeChat QR code. You can scan that and add me on WeChat, direct message me anything, any questions you have about today's webinar or anything. And then on the right side is our Telegram. I mentioned that before. We'll offer information for how to register for the AMCA, and we'll offer free daily math resources for you and your kids to enjoy every day of the week, right on there in our main chat. So that QR code will take you to our main chat there. If you have any questions, you can also plug them into the YouTube chat right now. I'll hang around for a couple minutes to answer any of your questions. But I just want to thank you all for attending tonight. And hopefully you learned a lot and can help your child prepare for the AMC 8 2020 coming up in just 52 days. So thank you very much and good night. Awesome.